Reference to or information about any specific product or service by name, trademark, or service mark in this podcast does not constitute an endorsement of that product or service. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. In addition, portions of this podcast episode were recorded virtually away from our podcast studio, so there may be some differences in audio quality. And now, on to the episode. Hello and welcome to Better Money with Elements Financial. I'm your host, Miranda Finley. I'm a certified financial wellness professional who has worked with thousands of people in all walks of life, and I'm also a real person with real financial experiences. I'll chat from both professional and personal viewpoints to help make your money better. Join us as we explore practical tips, real-life examples, and age-appropriate financial strategies to ensure your children grow up with a strong financial foundation. Here to help me do so are a few subject matter experts and parents themselves. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to hear from each of you and how through the years you've talked to your children about money. And up first, we have Liz Wertz. Liz is one of our certified financial planners through Elements Wealth Management, and she's here to talk to us about the age range of 1 through 6. Now, Liz, you have a couple littles yourself in your house, right?
I do. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old.
Perfect. So I think you're the perfect person to talk to us about that. How funny that worked out. But I have a hard time conceptualizing, like, even how to introduce financial concepts to age ranges this young. So how do you suggest parents do that?
Sure. We start just super simple, little things like, getting the fake money sets and playing restaurant or playing grocery. Just seeing the physical money is super helpful, especially when so much is done on a card now. My 6-year-old came back from school and they were working on a unit where they can match, here are 4 quarters. How many dimes does that equal? So just any kind of exposure, I think, is a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about play and like imaginary money. So how do you do that in your household?
Sure. My kids love to use their imagination and play pretend. So we'll do, restaurant and they're the servers and cook the food and then bring me my bill, or, grocery store or store. They think like putting things through a conveyor belt and checking it out is the coolest thing ever. So we have lots of play with kind of different store situations.
Yeah, and I love that I think through that play, you're building the foundational concept of like you trade goods for money, right? Um,
Absolutely.
that there's an exchange there for either services that you're being provided, like in a restaurant, or actual tangible goods, like in a grocery store. How do you even begin to have those conversations with kids in that age range, and how do you do it in your household?
Sure. So my husband and I have always been just very transparent. I mean, we don't go into the details of all of our finances, but we make sure to have those conversations that are appropriate for our kids to hear in front of them. If they want to really do something really fun on the weekend and we just came back from a vacation or we did something, and I'll say to them, well, that costs money and we don't have that money right now. So maybe we can do something else fun that's at home, or just knowing that, especially when it's on a card, money isn't just this magical thing that appears out of nowhere, that Dad and I go to work so that we can earn the money to be able to do those fun things. We're kind of incorporating it slightly with different chores. Luckily, also, my kids are young enough to not understand what a fair wage is. So, they'll help fold napkins, or my oldest will help pack my littlest's lunch and we'll give them a quarter, or, whatever. They don't really understand paper money yet,
Mhm.
so I'm going to ride this wave for as long as I can, because coins are top notch right now in our household.
I love that. And with what you do, I think a lot of people think about like wealth management, managing investments in securities and how that typically applies to us in adulthood and building wealth. But as many of the parents I know in my life, they really wish to build a stronger financial foundation and make sure their kids are better off than they were. And so, what are a couple of things that you suggest that parents look into when it comes to even this young age range?
Sure, absolutely. So there are a few things that I use personally, and then also I, advise my clients to do. But first and foremost, like getting a savings account is super easy, often free for a minor, and it just kind of instills in your kid's brain from the very beginning that there's a place where you can, you have your little piggy bank, but if you get birthday money or something that's a little bit bigger, we put it in the bank. Also, a 529 plan is something that my husband and I are starting to contribute a lot more to, just so whether it's college or whatever, other education expense we need to pay for them. And then one other key thing that not a lot of parents are aware of is that they can open a custodial Roth IRA for a minor. The minor does have to have earned income, but even, they're not doing this at age 1 to 6, but if they mow their neighbor's lawn or if they're doing a little bit of some chores, technically that can still count as that earned income, even if it's a tiny little contribution every year with the compound interest. It's all going to add up. And what better gift to give them, as they're graduating college or entering into their adulthood, however they do that, with already having this well-established Roth IRA.
Absolutely. And they've made it easier with 529s and with Roth IRAs that they can help your children buy their first home and really helpful things like that that have made it I think a little bit more flexible of what you can do with those. So that's excellent. Thank you so much,
Yes,
Liz. I appreciate you
definitely.
talking to us from the age ranges of 1 to 6.
Thanks
And
so much for having me.
absolutely. Thank you for coming back to the community workshop. Next up, we will be tackling ages 7 through 12. And we will be doing this with relationship manager Eliza Claborn. Eliza helps us manage some of our key partnerships like Butler University and IU Health. And she's going to be talking about earning and saving through the ages of 7 to 12. So you have also 2 children in your household, right,
I
Eliza?
do. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old will be 10 here in just a couple of months, actually. So
It happens fast, huh?
it it is just flying. So yes, yeah,
I love that. So what are you doing to kind of like bring about the conversations and the idea of money in your household with your 6 and almost 10-year-old?
yes. So with the their money is not like a real thing any longer, because it's like this mythical creature because of debit cards. Nobody uses cash anymore. So
Yeah.
we really enforce um, understanding what money is, that money is not just a piece of plastic, it is actual physical cash money. So my son, when he, for instance, mows the lawn, we will physically give him cash for him to put into his piggy bank, whether that's for spending money or for saving. But we physically give him the physical cash so that he understands the concept of money, that it is an actual real thing and not just mythical. You know, money
Right.
just comes out of nowhere and it's endless.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And again, that takes us back to that like exchange.
Mhm.
You work, you receive money, and then you can use those funds accordingly. Now, what is your suggestions to parents like once the kid has some money saved up in their piggy bank and they've
Mhm.
seen that physically grow, what is your suggestion to parents at that point?
Yeah, so we have savings accounts. We have grow accounts with elements for both kids. And once there is, I don't have a dollar amount, but once there is some substantial cash, and it's usually in dollar bills, so it's
Mhm.
kind of a wad that you can hold in your hand, but it's probably not
Yeah.
very much. Um, we actually physically take them into a branch and have them deposit those funds into their grow account. And then on occasion we'll show them on online banking how much money they have in their account so that they can see it again growing. Um, and they can physically see that that money is there, and
Mhm.
the dollar amount is larger than it was before.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And when you encourage, so I know like you said, you taught your son to mow lawns because
mhm.
he had a desire to get some like extras, some wants.
Yes.
So how did you like make that correlation between like here's something that you want and here's something that you can do to get to that?
Yes. So he is very much into video games, specifically Fortnite. And there are, I think they're called V-Bucks, but parents out there, they'll know. Um, but he's like, I want like all these extra skins, which are
Mhm.
different outfits.
Yep.
And so,
I also want more outfits,
well, same.
so I can relate.
Absolutely. Or he'll want to buy like, I think it's called the battle pass, which
Mhm.
are like upgrades and things.
Yep.
I honestly, it's like all Greek to me, but, um, so he'll say, I really want to buy X, Y, and Z. And we'll say, well, if you want those things, then you need to earn it. And he has learned that by earning it, he can go mow the lawn and we'll give him the money. But we actually require him to pay us back. So physically feeling the pain of giving us the money back. Um, and then we'll put it, we'll pay for it with our card. But he has to exchange that money back for what he wants. Um, so that's kind of how we've introduced that in him or in for him. But it's also kind of that concept that Liz talked about, like if you want something, just like mom and dad, like we have to go to work to earn that money, so you have to do some sort of work to earn that money, to be able to pay for it, for what you want.
Yeah, I love that. And when you're having these conversations, are you just having conversations centered around like your children and their money and how they can earn it? Or are you also having other conversations in front of and around and with your children?
Yes, similar to Liz, we really are very transparent about our finances. Of course, we're not putting like the burden on them and like, talking about bills and things like that.
Right.
But we really do focus on them being aware of where we are and what we can and cannot do. Um, we recently got back from vacation, and my daughter was like, well, I really want to go out to dinner, and we're like, well, we just come back from vacation, like, and we ate out a lot during that vacation, like we're not going to be doing that tonight or probably in the near future, because we've been spending money um at a higher rate than we normally would. So really just being transparent, talking about, I we're not going to go to Target and buy a toy because that's something you want right now. That's not in our budget this week, or that's not our budget for the next 2 weeks. But just being open and honest with them, uh, really helps them conceptualize and understand where and what money is and how it's spent or not spent.
I love that. Yeah. No, it sounds like you and your household, you and your spouse have really worked hard to set some like healthy financial boundaries for your finances. And I love that you continue to kind of teach the next generation that they also need to have healthy boundaries because that makes things better and stronger, through the ages.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for chatting with us today, Eliza. I love to have you on. And next up, we will be chatting with Curtis Dodd for the age range of 13 through 17. So, hey, Curtis, thanks for joining.
Hi, Miranda. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have two children as well. Man, there's just a theme here. Two children as well.
I do. I have an 11-year-old and a 21-year-old, so there's a 10-year gap in between.
Yeah,
And my hope is to learn from my mistakes for my 21-year-old and pass those down to the 11-year-old. But yeah, it's a challenge.
I love that. Certified girl dad, right?
Correct.
It's just
Couldn't have it
it's
any other way.
always a learning opportunity. So, we're going to chat with you about preparing your kids for the real world during this like age range of 13 to 17. The amount of things I wish that somebody had like sat down and talked to me. Not saying that like in my underdeveloped brain that it necessarily would have all made it through my thick skull, but I really want to hear from you about how you're starting to encourage like financial independence and preparing them to be like fully out on their own in this age range of 13 to 17.
Yeah, it's incumbent upon us as parents or grandparents. Many, like you said, many of us kind of learn through the school of hard knocks where we've made mistakes when we were younger and we had to learn the hard way. And so, in talking with my kids, there's very little about their finances that's being discussed in school. So really, it's up to us to give them a little bit of a head start. And so I think it really involves, getting them involved in the process and keeping them involved so that when they do get to that age to where they're going to fly solo a little bit, they've got a little bit of background and they've got, some degree of familiarity with the whole process. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard you kind of talk before, like you have a saver and a spender, right?
Correct. Yeah. Grace is my oldest is sort of the one with maybe a little bit more common sense. And we haven't really had to trigger her too much in terms of keeping their spending in line. But the young one is a little bit worse. So, yeah, it's a challenge in both ways. But I think most parents will say, my kids are so different. It's going to be a different process for each one of them. No question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you do to like encourage balanced spending and savings, especially when you're talking to two completely different, like when the hard wiring is different, that nature
Yeah.
versus nurture, they both had the
Yeah.
same the both had the same nurture, but the nature ends up being a little bit different. So how do you encourage that balance?
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about so far today, a lot of spending gets done on a card. There's maybe little cash involved in any of these transactions. So, especially for my younger one, you might load some money on her card, and you find out that she's spent some of that, or most of that, or even all of that, somewhat frivolously. And so, I think you have to hold them accountable by, the next time they need money. Well, you know what? We loaded your card with X amount of dollars last week, and now you've spent it on candy bars and frivolous items. So keeping track of that spending and making sure they don't spend frivolously, I think, is important. And then holding them accountable to the point, well, now that you really need something that you actually need, you've spent the money that we funded you. So it's just a matter of staying on top of it, because they can't, depending on their level of responsibility, sometimes they can't be trusted to make those kinds of smart decisions at that age. So it's just, like I said, a matter of staying involved and holding their hand through the process a little bit, but holding them
Yeah.
accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. That accountability. It only took me a couple of times of realizing that I had spent money on things that I like wanted in the moment, but I didn't
Right.
want ultimately. And then I did not have the money for what I wanted ultimately. And then my parents were like, nope. Like,
Correct.
and sticking to that made me have
Absolutely.
some skin in the game. Like I knew that it was my
Absolutely.
choices that had kind of brought me to where I was, and that moving forward in the future, I needed to determine what was more important to me and what wasn't when it came to spending money. So I love that you're instilling that early on.
Yep.
Now, when it comes to this age range, like credit is always a conversation. So what are you doing to explain the importance of credit and kind of balance that with teens?
Yeah, as they get into their teenage years, that's something that we all as parents or grandparents need to think about. I'm reminded of a sort of a horror story when I have viewed the credit of early let's just call them college age students, where they get out on their own, they've graduated, they've gotten a job, and now they need to maybe go buy a car or get an apartment.
Yeah.
And in instances where we haven't had those discussions about credit, I remember one young guy at IU Health who had to go out and buy a car. Well, didn't have any credit, goes to the dealer and gets turned down by 3 or 4 lenders. And then finally one said, you know what, we'll do it if you put $500 down. But the interest rate was 23, I'll never forget it, 23.9%. And maybe so in that 11-month time span that this young guy owned this car, his credit went from zero all the way up to 711. And so But the point is, had he had that conversation, or his parents had that conversation with him, and maybe gotten him started with a little bit of credit at a younger age, he wouldn't have had to kind of pay that high interest, and or even more so important, wouldn't need necessarily mom or dad to co-sign. So there's some ways that we can get our kids involved. One way that comes to mind is by adding them as an authorized user on a credit card. So now all of a sudden that pops up on their credit. They start to get credit for, the payments that mom and dad are making on their credit card. And so once they get ready to sort of fly solo, they've got a little bit of credit built up, and they don't necessarily need us to co-sign, or maybe have to pay that big deposit on their apartment, or, things like that. So I think that's important. We've all kind of heard horror stories. We love our kids. Maybe we want to co-sign for them, but it maybe turns out badly,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. And having those conversations sets not only your child up for success when they become independent and an adult, but it also sets you up for more financial success, because
100%.
continuing to shell out money or kind of be in a position where you don't want to tell your your child no,
Yeah.
that's tough, I'm sure. So,
Yeah.
and I also remember, like, during that time frame that you're talking about, my early 20s, I built a lot of confidence and self-esteem in myself by having financial independence and proving to myself that, like,
Yeah.
I didn't need help doing it, that I could do it.
No
So
question.
I hope that this conversation will kind of help some parents have those conversations a little bit earlier, so you don't have to have much tougher conversations later on. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Curtis. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we don't want to forget our adult children. So we're going to head into the age ranges of 18 plus, and managing that independence while being somewhat of a guardrail for your children and not abandoning them completely on their financial journey. And we're going to chat about that with Michelle Payne. Michelle Payne is our Vice President of Marketing and Communications. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Miranda. Thank you. I love this topic. So excited to dive into this somewhat tricky phase, as you referenced.
Yes, I'm sure it can be tricky. And you have experience with it. So you also, just the theme of the day is two children. You have two children, right?
I do. I do. Almost 20 and 15, both sophomores, one in high school, one in college.
Excellent.
Mhm.
So like you said, I think that this is really challenging, but how are you encouraging particularly your 20 son's daughter to be financially independent?
Mhm. Well, interestingly enough, Curtis said that his oldest is a saver and his youngest is a spender. In my household, it's the opposite. So, spending is the challenge area I find in this young adult stage of life. So, definitely want to give her that independence, yet, as you said, provide some guardrails. So, I think at this phase, the monitoring and the guidance is still very important. So, as my peers referenced, the sooner the better when you can have money conversations. Also, when they go out in the real world on their own for the first time, the conversations really shouldn't stop. You have to continue supporting them, guiding their decisions. You might not always agree with their decisions, but be there to provide advice as needed. And for me, the account access is helpful. If your adult child agrees to it, if you have access to their accounts, it provides some conveniences like doing transfers, depositing checks on their behalf. And then also sometimes, helping them redirect when it comes to spending decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about those is that if you're providing those guardrails with like account access, or even as Curtis suggested, helping your child establish credit early by perhaps being like a joint owner on a credit card. As your child becomes more financially independent, there are some really easy ways to kind of like pull back from that. So, with a simple form, you can be removed off of an account and no longer have access to that in your online banking. So, it's not a forever type of thing. It's just until you can ensure that um, your child is confident in making strong and smart financial choices. But they're gonna have to make some mistakes. So how do you balance that as a mom? I'm sure like your mom heart just like can see the train coming off the tracks, and sometimes you just have to like let it happen within reason. So how do you balance that?
Yes, you do. You do have to let them fail forward at times. So, as an example, my oldest spent the summer out of state, um, interning and working for a government program. So, in terms of wages, they were somewhat low. She would get a living stipend essentially. And this child is, she's very budget friendly when it comes to material items. She's a thrift shopper, and she really watches she's simplistic and minimalist when it comes to owning things. However, she loves experiences and she loves to travel, and we all know that that is expensive. So as she was working in the state of Maine, she had some opportunities to go to Vermont and to go to Canada. And so we were basically spending everything we were earning, right? And so when that happens, you have to, adjust. And in this case, she is going to have a job when she gets back to campus, and so that she can continue to earn throughout the school year and manage some of her educational expenses. So yes, I wasn't going to get in the way of those experiences, yet she has the accountability that, okay, you traveled, you had your summer experiences. Now we've got to, when we get back to campus, balance our classes with a part-time job.
Yeah, I love teaching that early, and I love that as a parent, you've taken the time to kind of help your child identify what kind of spender they are. So taking the time to step back and see where they're most likely to have pitfalls to like help them combat that, because even as financial professionals and financial experts, like we all have our things. I'm very similar to your oldest in that experiences are something that's very important to me, and material goods. Although my background would probably argue that most of these are from Goodwill. Um,
Mhm.
but material goods aren't as important. So learning that about yourself at a really early age and having the help of your parent doing that is key, to learn that balance. Because at the end of the day, we only have 100% to ever take home pay to kind of spend. And if we're spending over that 100%, or if our budget categories are a little out of whack, we haven't prioritized the things that are most important to us, all of those things are when money starts to be less fun.
Right. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so and Curtis touched on this in the teenage age range. But how do you continue having conversations about credit and building healthy credit as you head into adulthood, Michelle?
Well, in our household, it was important to begin establishing her own credit going away to college. So we did look into and place in her name a low limit credit card. So I am not a co-signer or a joint on the card in any way. It is fully in her name, and by doing that, she's allowing a few benefits. So number one, building the credit. Number
Mhm.
two, having a source for emergencies. And number three, we really like organizing all of her qualified 529 expenses onto the credit card, so that when she goes to buy books, sometimes they still buy textbooks, digital books, and even an iPad is a qualified expense. Then that's all on the card. And then we can request the reimbursement from the 529 and pay off the card. So that's been super helpful. And, a couple times this summer, even she had the credit card available for a couple of instances. So I've highly encouraged that. And when you have the low limit, it really is low risk.
Yeah, yeah, much lower stakes. I
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm.
And then anything else that you really want to mention in balancing that support with the independence for adult children?
Mhm. Well, this morning I was with the oldest, and I told her that I was going to do this podcast today in this community workshop, and I said, "So, what would you want students your age to know? What do you think is important to mention?" And she said, "I think it's important for people my age to think about, the debt they're taking on." and the savings they are building, because the habits that I have today are going to follow me into adulthood. So taking on too much too soon in terms of debt can create a burden when they're ready to graduate or move on to the next phase of their life, and they might feel that pressure of that debt, and might not have the extra time they want to look for the job they really want. They might feel, pressured to start earning sooner. And then, from the savings perspective, the sooner they can learn that habit, when they do graduate, they have to get that first apartment. They have to, maybe replace the car they had as a teenager. They're going to have that foundation, and that's going to be, they're going to be so grateful and glad that they were saving, even when the inclination is to spend, right? So I thought that was good advice, that beware of your habits today, because they are going to follow you in throughout your adulthood for sure.
I love that. What a perfect way to tie a bow on how to talk to your children about finances. Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate you being here. And thanks to Ellie for that rock star answer.
I'll let her know. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Thank you for joining us today as we talk through the importance of talking to your kids about money. We hope you were able to take something away from this to help make your money better. By tailoring financial lessons to each stage of your child's development, you can build a strong foundation for their future financial success. Remember, ongoing financial discussions within your family are key to creating understanding and comfort with financial topics. At Elements, we are ready to partner with your family every step of the way. Together, we can create a generation of financially savvy, healthy, and empowered people. Head to elements.org/advice for more information on how we can help your family. Find more episodes at elements.org/bettermoney or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to rate and review. And as always, reach out to us at bettermoney@elements.org with any questions that you may have.